Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you are here for this Libra full moon forecast where we go over the main astrological themes of the next 2 weeks. Today is April 1st, 2022, and it is the first full moon of the equinox season, right? Spring in the northern hemisphere, autumn in the southern hemisphere, and it has been it will be, let's just say that, because the full moon is exact much later on today, into the evening here, Eastern Standard Time in the US. So we got some time, about 12, maybe 13 hours. 13, interesting, considering that is the Sabian symbol degree of this upcoming full moon. So, but we have some time until this full moon is exact. So it is growing and will be exact, like I said, much later this evening here on the East Coast. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. I truly appreciate all of you so much. A little bit of housekeeping. We're going to talk about the solar weather just briefly, and we're going to launch right into this astrology, because one of the things that I am working on here on this channel is to consolidate my information. I personally love long form content, but I am finding that I have less time as more responsibilities, more clients, just more work is coming into my life, which is a great thing, but that also means I need more downtime and rest. So we'll see if this turns into the normal hour long or not. I have no idea. So let's charge forward. Now first, housekeeping. Catalyst membership folks, since email is the primary way that I let you know about things, especially when I post your readings on the membership site, please check your spam folders. And this actually goes for anybody who signed up for the Catalyst Energies email list in general. Please check your spam folders. It was brought to my attention that many of those emails were sitting in someone's spam folder. I send them to myself every time as a test run, and sometimes they, for years are still going into my spam folder. So please check it, especially if you're like, I haven't gotten anything in a while. I'm just going to cancel my membership. Check your spam folder, please. And if you ever are truly in doubt, just go to the membership site and log in, and you'll find the content that you're probably looking for. I have never not uploaded something in a timely manner without a lot of advance notice that it wasn't going to be there. So, and if you're on the email list for Catalyst Energies in general, you may want to check the spam folder if you're not getting anything and wondering where it is. Sometimes, I send emails to my employer about schedule things and whatnot, and it's almost 3 years since I've been working for his business, and he still gets my emails into his spam folder, and I'm emailing him something, average, probably weekly or every other week. So please check your spam folder. I notice my numbers of emails being open, especially from the membership, are going down, and I have a feeling that might be part of it. So I check my spam folder every day. It's just part of my routine. I don't read everything, obviously, but I'm always scanning to make sure that there's nothing there that I actually do want to read. So that's the only housekeeping thing I wanted to put out there. So my friends, we are in the first full moon with any kind of clarity, if you even want to call it that, for 2 months, because our last full moon was a total lunar eclipse. So we are coming fully, I would say, out of that whole eclipse hangover with this Libra full moon. And of course, it is the first full moon after the equinox, which means Sunday is Easter, right? That is how Easter is determined. It is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox. So everything is very based on a lunar calendar. Imagine that. So, and it's, like I said, it's the first real in 2 months, like full illumination. So full moons are always a time of clarification, purpose, fulfillment, or at least a full vision and clarification of the intentions that were not only set at the new moon, but what it is that we are responsible for acting upon and consciously engaging now through the rest of the lunar cycle. So I saw every client that I saw, every bodywork client that I saw yesterday had something very troubling, very disturbing. Obviously, there's a lot to be disturbed by on many levels, present company included. Okay, so I don't want you to think that I'm just sailing through life without any hardship or disturbance. I have my own basket of issues, and one thing that I tend to do is for a person who has no Gemini in their natal chart at all, tends to overthink a lot of things. And maybe that's because it's all Gemini in my draconic or oversoul chart, so I can't even help myself. But which is why I'm going to acupuncture for spleen and stomach issues, right? Because the spleen stomach channel in Chinese medicine governs the experiences of peace, right? And so when it's out of balance, the one thing is the worry and the overthinking. So I'm right there with you, and plenty of people, everybody yesterday on some level, even the one person I see who is a paraplegic and nonverbal person, even that person had something that they were communicating that was very much disturbing them, which was a physical issue in their body, which is, kind of tricky when you're paraplegic and you're nonverbal, right? You can't tell people how you're feeling and where it hurts. So thankfully, I was there to work on him and be like, oh, have you noticed this? But everybody had something, either something from their past that is a very traumatic experience that this time of year brings up. Another person came in and told me straight up that she was in survival mode all month. And she's like, it's been a month. And I was like, yeah, it really has. Like since the lunar eclipse and even with the Pisces new moon and the equinox, it's been very disturbing. A lot of things that people are working with. And so this is going to dovetail, strangely enough, is it really strange? Nicely into what I want to bring up about this full moon. And, this person's husband is being deployed next week, right? And so the point I'm trying to make here is that everybody's got some sort of, there's disturbing the waters, so to speak. And Libra is truly about equilibrium and balance, right? And it is an air sign. It is a cardinal air sign, which denotes some measure of momentum and action and thrust maybe behind it. Its opposite sign is Aries, which has all of those things. It is a Mars-ruled sign. We're going to talk about Mars. Mars is coming home during this next 2 weeks to Aries, so it's going to certainly be meeting Neptune, Saturn. Neptune definitely sextile to Pluto, conjunct Saturn, and eventually conjunct the Sun, and certainly going to be in a conjunction with Chiron down the road. So lots to talk about there, but we'll get there. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because that seems to be something that can easily happen with all of this Aries energy, and certainly with Mars coming into Aries. But the challenge is emotional equilibrium in the face of a strong desire for impetuousness, if you want to put it that way. Can we maintain an emotional equilibrium? Do we have the means to maintain that emotional equilibrium with everything that has presented itself? We're going to go back and talk about the new moon in Pisces and what that, do a little bit of review, what that represented, how we've been working with that energy. And then with this full moon presenting itself by the end of today, can we not only maintain or establish that emotional equilibrium, but in a way that's very childlike and imaginative, right? Because we want some things to happen and we want them to happen now, and that hence the impetuousness. And there can be a frustration that is akin to being an adolescent or a young person, where it's not so much idealism, but it is, I want the status quo to change right now. And the timing is not, it is not time for that, right? And I'll talk about the Sabian symbols when we get to the specific astrology and show you the chart so you can see what I'm talking about here. But these are general themes that, we can Varuk assault this and be like, I want it now. And I'll tell you what, Venus has been in Aries up until like 2 days ago. And that's all it's been, right? This is who I am and what I want. And that's the only focus. This is who I am and what I want. And we have to kind of make some decisions right now for ourselves, like really look at things honestly within ourselves, right? To utilize the full moon as every full moon, except maybe the eclipsed full moon, because that's a whole different ball game, as we've come to realize. And many of us have realized it for many eclipse cycles now, especially something so powerful as its convergence with the Chinese New Year and the Year of the Fire Horse, right? So lunar eclipses aside, these full moons are opportunities to really have a clear view of what normally is tucked away on the inside, something that is not easily visible. It's only really felt. Oftentimes it is something that is embedded in the subconscious, something that is our emotional landscape, but it's not always very obvious. This full moon, as most of them are, make it more obvious. And that's what I mean about clarifying our purpose. So we can Varuk assault this energy, right? I want it now, and maintain this sense of delusion and la land about it, right? Idle daydreaming. There's a difference between that and actively engaging our imagination about the life that we actually want to live and be part of. So we can either do that, or we can accept the seeming barriers, right, that come along with perfect timing, right? We have a desire, we have this potential, it's building up, I want it now, I want to change it now, and this full moon gives us the opposition of, well, yes. And, taking time out of the equation, obviously, it's all relative, if you want to put it, right? The theory of relativity, and that's more about a time and space thing. But are we going to, like I said, are we going to push the envelope here and be impetuous about it and then just kind of live in that daydream? Or are we going to actively be honest with ourselves, really embrace the clarity and feel what actual peace in our emotional landscape actually feels like? And from there is the ability to activate and utilize our imagination, right? So Sabian symbol language, for instance, 13 degrees Aries, which is where the sun is, and the sun is very happy in Aries. It is in its exalted position, and so we really feel not only the desire and the potential of who we are, but really expressing it from that vantage point or from that position, right? This unexploded bomb at a social protest. That's the Sabian symbol of 13 Aries, right? And the idea, again, that there's this frustration and this desire to change the status quo, but really the goodness of humanity and goodness as a whole is able to, stifle what otherwise would be a selfish or quote unquote evil intention. And perhaps this will translate out into the geopolitical spectrum. And we will talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about, where Mercury is right now, and coming out of its shadow and the timing of things, because it's still in its retrograde shadow, right? Mercury is still in its retrograde shadow. So please keep that in mind, that we are still mentally going over territory we've been over twice now. Some good news about that is Mercury and Jupiter will be in a trine tomorrow, but there will be lots of other challenging yet growth opportunity transits in the next 2 weeks. What we're going to find here as we look at the chart is that the personal planets and luminaries, right, the Sun and Mercury and Venus and Mars are all going to have different types of relationships with the outer planets. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, even Chiron. So there's a lot of personalized engagement with these much larger patterns that have been unfolding. Yes, everything is moving direct right now. And that's certainly something to take advantage of. And we are in the year of the fire horse. So the momentum and the charge behind that is really strong. But, again, in order to really manifest, and it's such a buzzword, but in order to manifest or to resonate with the life that we actually want, right? The future we want to create for ourselves in this present moment, we do have to engage that imaginative playfulness. And that's a message that's been coming through for me personally over the last weeks. And so I know that I can't necessarily be the only one, and it's been coming through too in some of the personal readings that I've been doing with people, to don't lose that part of yourself, to engage that or to revisit that imagination. And 13 degrees Libra, which is where the full moon will be exact, 12 to 13 degrees, is, children blowing soap bubbles. There is this sense of play and imagination and really being able to tap into that space where it's kind of magical and enchanting, right? It can seem like it's not that when we feel like we're not getting what we actually want. But we have to consider that maybe what we actually want isn't fully formed yet, or that maybe we're being influenced by someone else's intentions to trigger something before it's actually divinely timed. Does that make sense? But ultimately, this full moon is highlighting for all of us these, are we going to kind of stay in this idle daydreaming position, or are we going to really embrace the fact that, we don't want to engage in anything that falls short of a very deep purpose. And in that we have something to work with in our imagination, and that can bring us a sense of emotional peace and equilibrium, not escapism. And certainly the spiritual bypassing and the escapism and the toxic positivity aspect of things can certainly be at play here. And that's everybody's own journey as far as I'm concerned. So really think about what you are working with and where you want to be emotionally. And from here on out, the rest of the 2 weeks of this lunar cycle, we're going to have the opportunity to really put that into practice. So if you thought it was kind of, challenging up to this point with the lunar cycle, right? The Pisces new moon, and then we had the Mercury retrograde, and then we had the equinox. That was all just reacting to things that were starting to come up. When the full moon happens, we're fully responsible now, right? All right, we are fully responsible to objectively and consciously maintain the energy of what we identify as our purpose and fulfillment throughout this cycle as the light of the moon wanes. So just really quick, we're still waiting for that CME to land from that X-class flare that happened 2 days ago. Kind of interesting that the Artemis moon mission is set to launch today, April Fool's Day, and the Libra full moon. I thought that was kind of interesting. So the CME has not landed, but it's coming. I can feel it in my body, right? I can feel it. I woke up and I'm just like, God, everything is so inflamed in my body. And yes, the weather has shifted here in north central PA and probably most of the East Coast, anywhere that's super seasonal, right? It got warm, it got wet. That always has an impact. No doubt, but I can just feel that solar weather. And there's a coronal hole that is facing us too, and we'll get the energy from that any minute now. So it's probably going to be like a 1-2 punch, and I can already just feel it in my body. So what do you feel? Anybody else feeling achy and tired? I mean, that's just normal, but achy and tired, inflamed, right? Your joints are extra inflamed. Maybe your GI stuff is kind of acting up, things like that. Sleep has been a little difficult for sure. So do what you can to take care of yourself. I will say that yesterday at acupuncture, I walked away feeling very very peaceful and grounded. It was really nice not to have to be flattened in order to get a sense of peace. You know what I mean? Like when you get that treatment that just like destroys you in a good way and you're like, I could sleep forever. This was a little bit different, and that's exactly what the intention was. So I'm very grateful to have such a amazing practitioner and provider in my area. What a blessing. And yeah, so feeling that peace, I really connected to that yesterday. Today's a little different because my body is just like, it's reverberating with what's to come. So again, take good care of yourself, do what you need to do to take care of your body, take care of your mind, finding that place of equilibrium, that peace within yourself. And yeah, hold on tight. Oh boy. It has been a month. It really has. I, for one, am so grateful to be out from this eclipse window fully. So, all right, let's start looking at the astrology here and get a play-by-play as best we can. So, all right, we're going to share the screen here. Share the screen. All right. Okay, and we're going to change this layout here a little bit so you're looking at the screen. Alrighty. So let me make some adjustments here to this chart. So my usual go-to for astrology charts that are online and free is back in action. It had been swarmed by some bots, and so it was down for the count for a little while. Okay. But it does have ads, which is really annoying. All right, friends, let's see here. Make sure that everything is good to go. It looks like it is. So just a reminder in case you're new and you are also, diving a little bit deeper into astrology so you understand what I'm doing. And this is just a review. What I cast for when I cast a chart is I look at the true nodes, I look at the true Lilith, right? Because these positions oscillate, they go back and forth, and so some astrologers read for the average or the mean, right? And so that's perfectly fine. That's just not what I look at. I look at what is happening in that moment, and so the nodes of the moon oscillate, the position of Black Moon Lilith oscillates, and that's what I'm looking at as well. So just to give you some insight, and we are looking at tropical Western astrology, right? Where the vernal equinox is the point of 0 degrees Aries and everything else is equally divided among, throughout the 360-degree circumference with the Earth in the center. I'm using a geocentric. That's just how I read. So, and then we go from there because we're looking at geometric patterns based on longitudinal alignment, right? Not everything is aligned perfectly horizontally or latitude-wise, but everything that comes into direct aspect, it has an alignment longitudinally in this grid. Anyway. Sometimes I feel like I need to, because there's new viewers or people that are starting to get deeper into astrology. So, and they use, just like I did, they use these types of videos as a way to learn. And that way you know what I'm looking at. And I'm not just like, predicting things and spoon feeding everything to everybody because I'm not really interested in doing that. So, all right, so today is the 1st of April. We do have our Libra full moon, and that also means, as you can see here, that it's not just the full moon, the sun-moon opposition, but the moon is in opposition to all of this Aries energy, including by tomorrow, it'll be in opposition to our friend Chiron, who is now coming into alignment with the Andromeda galaxy. And maybe that's something that in the Catalyst membership will do a specific reading on because because of the starseed nature of it and the intense nature of what Chiron represents in the natal chart and all of the charts really, in terms of our own soul evolution, it needs its own energy. So, and the Andromeda galaxy is the only star seed origin that I read for that is outside of our galaxy, right? Other than there's one in particular called the Great Attractor, so 14 degrees Sagittarius, if you have that in your chart, that is something outside of our galaxy too, that is a gravitational well that has pretty significant importance in terms of galactic astrology as well. But anyway, we're getting off path here. So let's go back to what we're talking about, which is the moon in Libra, right? Emotional equilibrium. So if you have a moon in Libra in your natal chart or your progressions or even your draconic chart, then you're going to be very familiar with this experience of emotional oscillation, right? Back and forth in order to find, in a sense, or experience emotional equilibrium. Libra moon people, I would say, probably tend towards emotionally finding balance within, right? As opposed to externalizing those actions or behaviors or experiencing them externally. It's something that we experience internally. It's an inside job with Moon and Libra, okay? But it's opposite all of this Aries energy, including Neptune and Saturn. One thing that is really present, and I'm going to bring this up again multiple times because it seems to be really present in multiple ways, but this Pluto in Aquarius energy, especially at 5 to 6 degrees Aquarius, because this is where it's going to retrograde. Number one is Pluto at 6 degrees Aquarius, but it represents something transpersonal. So the Sabian symbol for Pluto, and we talked about this in the last one because this was exact before this full moon. So on the 28th, actually, this Saturn-Pluto sextile, which is a one-off, right? Because usually there's more than one of these transits with these outer planets because they retrograde for so long, for big portions of the year that they tend to come back into these relationships more than once, except for this. This is a one-off, right? The Saturn-Pluto sextile. And a sextile is very harmonious. It requires that we participate in some way. And because Saturn is not happy in Aries, it's not as powerful. It actually wants to be in Libra. So the opposition with the moon and Saturn feels like today is especially important because it's emotionally sitting in the place that Saturn probably would prefer to be in. But Saturn in Aries, it's going to and this is what I've certainly been seeing and experiencing, is this overcompensation of control, right? Because Saturn does represent exactly what the Sabian symbol for 6 degrees, 5 to 6 degrees Aries represents. So you have a square and one side is brightly illuminated and it represents this one-sided urge for inner stability. But it's the square itself that's very Saturnian. It's a powerful structure, it's stable, it's contained, it represents power. And then you have this Aries component. It's like, well, this one side is just like, no, I am going to assert myself. And it's very emotional, right? It's emotional stability. So Saturn in Aries will overcompensate for its lack of just inherent power in something like Libra or its home sign of Capricorn, right? And so I have felt that there is even stronger resistance to anything that challenge this urge or this desire for one-sided emotional stability, everybody else be damned, basically. Now, that's not necessarily a terrible thing. It just is what it is. But the Saturnian nature of it is much more structured. It seems like it is overcompensating by taking more power, perhaps taking more responsibility. All of these Saturnian more limits, right, to what is going on within us and around us. So and sometimes that is kind of like just blocking everything else out and only focusing on that to the extent that there's no malleability, there is no flexibility, there's no opportunity for necessarily change, okay? And there's no way to conceptualize something that we want to come forward because in relationship. And that's a big part of what Libra represents. It is the scales, right? So there is no way to get out of relationship when it comes to Libra. So I feel like this Saturn-Pluto sextile that was exact on the 28th, and it's still very, very present. I mean, it's still active. It has, in some ways, it, in some ways, it has facilitated a very structured and mature type of transformation, right? But I feel like that because it's in Aries and Aquarius, and specifically because Saturn is in Aries, it has not been exactly the most comfortable, and there's been a lot of resistance to it, especially because 6 degrees Aquarius is a masked figure performing ritualistic acts in a mystery play. And we've talked about this before, you know. It certainly brings up a lot of images of like Eyes Wide Shut and secret societies and occult, mystery school stuff. And you can take it that way if that's meaningful to you. But it has more to do with the fact that, you know, when we live in this collective and we are engaged in something more than just ourselves, that sometimes we put on the mask of something else in order to enact something beyond us. That's why it's called transpersonal. And Pluto is the agent of transformation, right? It is the final word because it represents the destructive process in which things are broken down, reorganized, and put back together and reborn, right? So the resurrection is part of, I mean, if we're going to get into Easter themes, right? The resurrection is, and the whole process actually of the crucifixion and resurrection really falls into this sextile very well. And the maturity and the disciplined structure of something so deeply powerful and something that's so not personal, when you're talking about transpersonal responsibility, it has not been easy, but the type of transformation that can come from releasing the stronghold on what it is, just what we think we want, is where it's where the transformation is really going to take root, in my opinion. And this is what this full moon, I think, really is such a blessing in a lot of ways, of like, if we can really let that go. And it doesn't mean we just give up on ourselves, right? We don't just put ourselves to the side. It's impossible. Like this whole thing about, like, you know, destroying the ego and shedding it and being outside of it is such a lie, right? I mean, that's just, you know, cult programming, in my opinion, right? You don't live without the ego. The ego is your sense of self in this material existence that navigates through all of this, right? So it does feel like that the full moon is certainly a blessing, but we have to be able to actually have to be able to imagine that even when we face disappointment, even when we are faced with or struggling with having to let go of something that we think that we want, or it has to look a certain way, to the point where we might even like try to destroy it, or destroy something in the process of trying to force the issue, which I think is, again, a big part of this full moon that's coming, is that, you know, we want it now, and the potential to destroy the status quo through our impetuousness can really cause a lot of damage to what we're doing. So I just wanted to read from the Astrological Mandala, which is Dane Rudger's book, about all the Sabian symbols, about, again, a masked figure performs ritualistic acts in a mystery play. This is where Pluto is, right? Remember, final word here. And this is where it will retrograde later. Okay, so we know that we're going to be coming back to this point next year when Pluto stations direct and comes out of its shadow. The individual's involvement in long-established patterns of activity aiming at the release of collective power. Rituals are binding, and often the performers wear masks, for they do not act as human persons, but as focal points for the release of transpersonal forces. The individual is seen having assumed a transpersonal responsibility. So I didn't read the whole thing. I just wanted to give you some of the highlights here. That can be a hard pill to swallow when we are so, like, with this Saturn in Aries. It's just like, no. But if we can know who we are behind the mask, right? There's still a person, an individual that puts that mask on and acts in that transpersonal way. We don't forget, and it's the same thing. We're not destroying the ego. That's cult programming, right? And then they build you back up. We know that we are a person behind that mask, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, that is really what motivates us to step into this role or this power. And that's where the real power is coming from, this Pluto in Aquarius energy, right? Assuming a transpersonal responsibility. Things might not be going exactly the way that you want them to go, or you think they should go, or you're having your sense of self really challenged right now. That sextile is really anchoring an opportunity for transformation. And this full moon is like, can you still engage and tap into that sense of innocence and play and imagination and find a peace of mind emotionally? And I'm talking to myself just as much as I'm talking to the rest of you. So just keep that in mind as well. And like I said, the moon in Libra is opposite all of this Aries energy, right? And it's difficult with Neptune because it is all smoke and mirrors with Neptune direct, even in something that seems so straightforward as Aries. It's bold, it's courageous, it's idealism of bold and courageous when we're talking about Neptune. But there might be fog, right? The fog of war, the smoke and mirrors, the delusion, the fantasy, the illusion, right? Are we really, do we really see ourselves? Do we really see ourselves in alignment with the life we want to live? You know what I mean? Does the profile of our face suggest the shape of the country we're in? Does that make sense? That's actually the Sabian symbol for 3 degrees Aries. Again, the moon opposite Neptune is really going to challenge that, and certainly is going to give us this emotional sense of is it? This is where it's going. So maybe it would be important to really tap into how we feel about that, right? Because maybe we have been kind of deluding ourselves. Maybe it has been all fantasy with Neptune, right? So all of these Libra, Aries, and especially if you're a Libra, Aries, if you're in the cardinal signs at all, especially right in that anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees of Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, this full moon is really hitting you good. So, because it's either going to be conjunct, opposite, or in a square. So you're really going to feel that. And again, and if you are a cardinal sign like that, sun, moon, and rising, you have strong cardinal signs just in your charts in general, you're going to have a hard time with that momentum being stifled in any way. So some good news past this full moon as we move through the 2 weeks ahead. So some highlights here is we're going to have, Mercury and Jupiter in the third of the 3 trines that they've had. So let's skip forward here so you can see it. So this is on the 3rd. So you're looking at Good Friday, right? So Mercury and Jupiter. This is a great day to be very reverent. Is that the word? I don't know if reverent is the word, but as you can see here, Mercury and Jupiter are in that trine, that last trine, and it's a feeling trine. So you're talking about Mercury and Jupiter, right? Knowledge and understanding. Mercury ruling knowledge, Jupiter ruling understanding. Both direct now, and both in water signs. So it's about knowledge and understanding at the emotional and spiritual level. And in a trine, it's very stabilizing. It is very foundational. And again, 15 to 16 degrees Pisces is the man, in the quiet of your study, you receive an inspiration, right? Jupiter, 16 degrees Cancer, a man studying a mandala, right? The issue of personality integration into something more than yourself. This, again, this is not new. This is the 3rd time this has come around now that Mercury is direct, still not out of shadow. And neither is Jupiter, by the way, because it just stationed direct not that long ago, too. So they're both still in their shadow, but they're still, now this is a new way of thinking, conceptualizing, actively expanding now into the realms of personal power, where we belong, the sense of home and family when we're talking about Cancer themes here. This trine is very stabilizing, and again, it suggests that we need to really tap into our inner compass and our inner strength and our inner knowing in order to really see the mandala for what it really is and where we fit into it, right? So that's some good news for Good Friday. But of course, then we have Venus, who is now home in Taurus. This is her home territory. She gets very possessive in Taurus and the second house, right? Because she went from this is who I am and what I want, and now she's like, this is mine. She's very possessive here, right? For all the wonderful things that Venus in Taurus represents, we get very possessive about what is ours, right? What gives us comfort, security, what we value. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that square to Pluto, think about all the things I just said about Pluto at 6 degrees Aquarius, and then you have Venus in Taurus in a square to that. You think that there's not going to be some issue around like, no, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to conquer this obstacle in my relationships, in the things that matter to me, right? Because 6 degrees of Taurus is a bridge across a deep gorge. Now, we've been talking about, balancing polarity, working with polarity and establishing equilibrium. You're talking about a bridge across a deep gorge, this group cooperation, because it's not just individual, right? It's the group actually conquering obstacles with something very tangible like work and resources, right? Again, in a square to Pluto, that's just like, what is it for? Now, are we conquering obstacles and building bridges for our own sake? Because that's a huge, I don't want to say a risk, but possibility with Venus in Taurus. Like I said, she's very possessive when it comes to what is hers, right? It's just the fact of it, right? And in a square to Pluto, it is really going to cause some friction in terms of, conquering these obstacles, building these bridges. What is it for? Is it for our own kind of like, this is mine and I'm going to be holding it very tightly to myself and I'm doing it for myself? Or, Pluto, which has the final word, again, it's transpersonal. However, that does not mean that we don't put our personal initiative and our sense of meaning and value behind building that bridge, right? But if we think that it's all for us, Pluto is going to put you in your place, right? And like I said, Pluto has the last word. But remember, the ultimate aspect of Pluto is power, real power. Real power, raw, personal, transformative power. It also is, brings up a lot of repressed stuff when Pluto's in square, especially to Venus in Taurus, about money, about resources, about, that's a big one that just hit me very hard right now. Ouch. Right, about resources, Venus in Taurus and resources, is this mine? Right? And what you're doing it for, and, putting your resources to conquering obstacles, building bridges, right? Again, the square to Pluto is going to bring out a lot of the repression around these things. And maybe that needs to come up, right? Maybe that needs to come up. Maybe there are some of us that have been building bridges and conquering obstacles because, we have identified ourselves with the mask. You see what I mean here? It's one thing to know that you're putting on that mask and you're acting in this transpersonal way, knowing that you're going to take it off and go back to being yourself once the ritual is complete, whatever that is, right? If you start identifying yourself with that mask, again, Pluto is just going to really pull, it's going to pull away all of the stuff that can't stay. Right? So those things are going to come up while Mercury and Jupiter are in this trine of the real work here is, and the real stabilizing force emotionally between what we know and what we understand is really going to come from tapping to our inner knowing, right? And how to integrate ourselves into what is more than us, where we belong, right? It's just like putting your roots in the soil. We have to understand, the composition of the soil, where things can go, right? If you try to like plant stuff in really hard clay or like even bedrock, it's not going to go anywhere, right? So you have to understand the lay of the land. Well, Venus in Taurus is definitely the lay of the land. So but for what purposes, I think the square is really going to bring this out. And so it can be very uncomfortable. So we're already at 43 minutes and 49 seconds. So I think my whole goal is out the window, but that's fine because we're on a roll right here. And we're just going to blaze through the rest of this because it really just comes down to the things that I said earlier, which is that the personal bodies, the sun, Venus, Mars, Mercury, are all making connections with the outer planets, even Jupiter, right? Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, Neptune, even Saturn is going to be part of this conversation. And it's going to be happening all through this lunar cycle. So as we go through Easter weekend, we'll just go day at a time here. What we're going to find is that the sun is going to square Jupiter. That's always fun. Talk about like overdoing it when the sun and Jupiter come into a square. And they're both very happy. They're both exalted in their positions. If this wants to ever load, I don't know if it will. Sometimes this site has problems. So while it's loading, I will talk about sun squaring Jupiter. They're both exalted, so they're both very powerful. They're going to be in a square. More cardinal squares, Aries and Cancer. Yeah, it definitely is not wanting to load right now, so that's okay. We'll see if it decides to. I might have to, here, we'll just reload it and see what happens. There we go. Yes. And we also have a moon in Scorpio, so talk about the inner depths, right? We're going to be feeling those feels pretty strongly as well. Oh, also, fun little fact here, that 17 to 18, 17 degrees Sagittarius, 17 degrees Pisces, both of these degrees, Sabian symbol-wise, have to do with Easter. So, and they're in a square to each other too. Ooh. But yeah, so on Easter, on the day of Easter, which is the 5th, right? Easter Sunday, we have sun in square to, where are we here? Yep, the sun in Aries in a square to Jupiter. And so this oftentimes will lead to indulgence and, some ego battles here. And you can see that Jupiter has moved into the next degree of Cancer, which is actually very interesting, is kind of the crucifixion of the seed, if you want to, get into that symbolism again. 17 degrees Cancer is the germinating seed, and it is written about in the astrological mandala as the crucifixion of the seed. So the ego needs to fall away in order for the seed to germinate. The shell of the seed needs to fall away in order for the new growth to come out. And it's funny that the sun at 17 degrees, because that's where it'll be exact in its square, is very interesting imagery. It's two spinsters sitting in silence, right? This inward withdrawal. So you're going to really, as Jupiter's like, okay, now it's time to start, expanding even further, right? As this new potential is growing. The sun in Aries is going to be like, I'm going to just pull in right now. So there's certainly going to be some issue around this square as well on Easter. However, from there, Venus is going to sextile you're going to see that Venus is going to come into a sextile with the North Node. That means it's going to trine the South Node. And that even after that, Mars is going to sextile Uranus because now it's coming into these last degrees of Pisces. The other thing I want to point out too is that, is that Uranus has also moved into the very last degree of Pisces, right? So still very much involved with the Pleiades. 30 degrees, Taurus. Uranus is coming into the last degree of Taurus, right? That means it is getting dangerously close to Gemini. That's going to be happening in May. I believe it's going to be May. A peacock parading on the roof of an old, or the terrace of an old castle, right? The idea here that there is an aloofness and a consummation of everything that has come being presented. Now, the peacock is kind of like the standard animal associated with Venus. And so this idea that everything kind of consummates, everything that is coming together, basically, and it's not just you, but it's everything that has come before you. That's why Taurus is the objective reality, because the soil is based layers and layers and layers of life that have come through and decomposed and added their elements back into the soil, as opposed and not as opposed to, but in conjunction with all of the elements, the inorganic elements that are part of the soil as well. I'm just using this as an analogy here. So if we were to look a little deeper here at 30 degrees Taurus, the personal display of inherited gifts, right? That you are more than just yourself. And I think this is important to consider too, because Uranus is going to certainly, move things around, especially if you're going to talk about a sextile with Mars that is on the cusp of coming back into Aries. So, it's confirmation, it is consummation, a consummation of individual efforts. And it suggests that such a consummation is hardly possible except when a line of ancestors forms its base, right? That you are more than just your individual actions. Certainly you are a person who has your own desires, your own potentials, you are a unique signature of the divine spark, right? But this transit with Mars in particular, make sure we're in the right date here, because I think it's the 8th that it is exact. But you can see that even the astrology chart, just looking at it, you can see that things are starting to warm up a little bit more. They're going to be more active for the most part throughout Easter weekend. So like I said, I think it's the 8th. Yeah, it is April 8th. So that's next Wednesday. That's a week from today. You're going to see that Mars is going to sextile Uranus. And, this is usually a fairly favorable type of transit. You have Mars that's about to come into Aries. That is, maybe there is something that shifts and changes in terms of everything that has come up to this point, that is going to really flip the script and allow our personalized action to be in alignment with what it is that we visualize for ourselves, right? I think this is actually a really good transit. Sometimes getting Mars and Uranus together can be like a tower moment, but the sextile does suggest that it's harmonious. Yes, it's going to be disruptive because it's Uranus and it's in the Pleiades, and it's very close to Gemini. But you're in these like mastery degrees, these starseed markings, these galactic degrees of both of these signs. And so I feel like that this is one of those moments that everything kind of comes to, like I said, a consummation, and you're really just fulfilling everything that is developed up to this point. That to really just push us into this next stage, right? So Mars and Uranus in the sextile by next week, I think is really I think it's going to be yes, it's probably going to be very disruptive in its own way, but this is one of those types of transits where you can take full advantage of that shift or that really rapid reorientation, and actually, propel yourself into something brand new, a whole dimension of being, because Mars is going to come into Aries right after that on the 9th. And that is all that new potential, all that new vulnerable potential starting to rise to the surface, right? And so maybe even the Uranus energy is going to highlight, or something changes, or it's just a flash of insight, right, of just like, oh, everything that's happening has been the result of everything that has come before it over and over, and it's just consummated to this point. Maybe even that is just a flash of insight that gives the personal, a direction to the personal initiative. And I think that that's really a really good thing personally. Because again, there's so much disturbance and there's so much questioning and there's so much going on right now for people in that they're just kind of losing hope and really sinking in and or panicking, right? There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of panic, there's a lot of despair, there's a lot of suffering in all corners, and I see it every day. I feel it on people's bodies. I hear it when they tell me, I have my own issues. So that type of transit, I think, is going to be really helpful for perspective, and that's where Uranus has been putting us up to that point, right? We have to see two sides of any situation in order to have a mature perspective about whatever it is. And then we just have this, I think, this flash of insight with this Mars-Uranus sextile. So speaking of Mars, that means that Mars is going to come in to Aries, and it's going to have a conjunction with Neptune. Now this is some fog of war territory, right? This is, and it's dangerous because when Mars and Neptune come together, I mean, we're taking action based on these idealistic and broad, humanitarian, spiritually motivated type of feelings and action, definitely taking action. So it's not that it's all bad. It's just when you have this, conjunctions are very activating. They're not always great. They can cause some issues because they're like, triggering explosions, and squares and oppositions are very similar. They cause a lot of friction and tension, and they're uncomfortable. And a Mars-Neptune conjunction like this in Aries, I feel like can just as easily be a false kind of or a premature type of action based on, not even premature, but an action based on a fantasy or delusion or not being able to see the full coastline. Do you know what I mean? So, but the other side of that is that it can be so inspired. Oh, I'm getting big heart openings right now. Talking about it, just so inspired and just so like you don't even have to think about it. It's just instinctual. Mars is the superhero. It's the action hero. And, in conjunction with Neptune, that really is about idealistic and humanitarian and very compassionate positions. This can be a beautiful thing. It really can. You just have to be really grounded. And be very clear about what it is that is motivating you and certainly what you visualize for your own future. And this is on the 13th. So that's the 12th. The 13th. So we're talking about next weekend at this point. So we've already passed our third quarter moon. And we have Mars conjunct Neptune, and we have Venus sextile Jupiter. I think that this also is going to be... Of course. Let's see if I can reload it here. I think that this is also a really very helpful transit. So you have these two benefics, right? Venus in Taurus, Jupiter in Cancer. They're both very powerful in these signs. They come into a very favorable, harmonious, and transformative sextile. So 16 to 17 Taurus. Now remember what I said about the crucifixion of the seed. That's where Jupiter is now. That there's growth that's starting to happen, right? Up until this point, especially since moving out of retrograde, and I'm talking about Jupiter, out of retrograde and into the 16th degree of Cancer. Up until this point, there's just been a lot of consideration and internal work, I would say, and understanding, working to understand our place in all of it. Now there's actual growth that's happening with Jupiter. And it is big picture stuff. It's about alchemy and transformation in that way. And 16 to 17 degrees Taurus is a very interesting Sabian symbol, actually. So it is a symbolic battle between swords and torches, refusing to depend on the past. Now think about the crucifixion of the seed, right? The seed was its own entity. It is the ego. And all the potential of the growth of that plant is inside the seed, okay? So now it's burst open. It has shed that ego and is now growing in communion with all of the elements around it. So refusing to depend on the past, the seeker turns warrior, fighting anew the great eternal war. So there's a polarization of values that this degree represents. So when Venus and Jupiter are in a sextile like this, you're talking about, what is valuable, what is meaningful, and especially in Taurus, very palpable resources, our own past, right? That's the thing about Taurus and the second house. It does represent, the past that we come out of. These are habits. These are our ancestral lineage. This is our genetics, right? Not to say that epigenetics don't have an impact. And in fact, I feel like that's a lot of what this is discussing here, is that rather than staying steeped in the past, we are now starting to come out of it. And this sextile with this Jupiter in Cancer like this is, the alchemy that is happening, right? The catalyzing energy that is happening in terms of growth, right? And germination. So maybe it's in the crucifixion of the seed, so to speak, that we are able to realize that is the past. And it's not that it's negative. It's not that it's something that we have to try to flush away. And because if it wasn't for the ego, then, or the seed, everything is encompassed in it, but we have to move forward. That's part of the cycle. And I feel like this sextile is really going to assist in that process, along with the Mars-Neptune conjunction. So that I think is really favorable as well. It's really going to help us move forward and to do it intentionally with a sense of ownership. That's a good thing about Venus and Taurus, really taking ownership of what is ours and responsibility to a certain extent. I mean, Venus is not very responsible, but we'll get to that with Mars and Saturn coming into a conjunction. I don't think that's happening until after the next new moon, but it's getting pretty close at this point. So we have Mars conjunct Neptune, Venus sextile Jupiter, right? Don't get too caught up, and unless you're studying astrology, don't get too caught up in all the technical stuff. But if you are studying astrology, you definitely should get caught up in these technical things, because this is the blueprint of how you read an astrology chart, are these aspects and what they represent. So right after that, so the 14th, we have more favorable. You see, it's all blue lines right now. Mercury sextile Uranus, right? That means Mercury's coming also into the last degree of Pisces. And this is also when Mercury comes into Aries. So it's having the same relationship that Mars just had with Uranus coming into Aries. But now instead of our action, it's our mental capacity, right? It's our consciousness. It's movement, right? Mercury rules movement, like the wind, you know what I mean? Travel, short-term travel, the movement of information, communication. So it's going from this very spiritual, very energetic, very, in the background, collective unconscious, into something very personal, very subjective, and very cardinal fire, right? But before that happens, Mercury will sextile Uranus in the same place that Mars did. So again, visualizing how our communication and our conscious movement going forward based on that sudden insight, especially with Mercury and Uranus in this type of relationship. There's definitely mental breakthroughs, flashes of insight, sudden awareness about how everything has consummated up to this point. And we're really just kind of strutting our stuff around, right? We're just a culmination of everything that has come before us to this point. And we've added certainly our own flair to that, much like the peacock, right? But again, that's another flash of insight, a sudden breakthrough, a mental breakthrough, taking us into another air. Now we're going to be really Aries heavy at this point. So that's also something to keep an eye out for, is things being very Aries heavy, right? Cardinal fire. So I feel like this fire horse energy is really going to ramp up very personally and transpersonally, right? Because you have Neptune and Saturn here as well, and Chiron in Aries. So, and everything is direct. So there's just going to be a lot of personal momentum, I feel like, moving through April. And then the 16th, which is our balsamic moon, and we're already in the balsamic moon, but really the balsamic moon on the 15th of April. We're going to see. Now, Lilith is going to be in opposition to Uranus. And the only thing I want to say about that is just remember the Heyoka, the sacred clown, the jester, right? That energy is going to be in opposition to Uranus. And so something as we come into the balsamic moon and a new moon that's going to be what? Conjunct Chiron. There's going to be a mirror here. There's going to be a mirror, so just be prepared for it, because a new moon conjunct the Andromeda Galaxy is a huge starseed thing. And it's a trigger for like social revolution, big time. So, and is really going to trigger something phenomenal, in my opinion. But we'll get there. We'll get there when it's time. But in the meantime, what we're going to see is that the Sun and Chiron come into an exact conjunction. Mars will sextile Pluto at the same place that all these other, Aries things have sextile Pluto, including the Sun, including Saturn, and Venus was in a sextile to Pluto when she was in Aries, and now Mars. Now remember that Mars is the other ruling planet of Scorpio. So when these two are in a sextile each other, it is going to trigger that competitive drive, especially with Mars in Aries, to win. And at 6 degrees Aries, remember the square with the one side brightly illuminated, right? It is going to just push that agenda, but in a way that is, I think, a lot more aware and conscious and intentional about what it is that we are how we're really transforming, right? We're very intentional about, like, I know that I'm putting on this mask and acting in this way, either in my personal life, my professional life, in my family, in my community, whatever it is. There's going to be a lot more personal ambition and drive and courage when it comes to this, because we know that we're still who we are underneath that, even if we are stepping into a role that is transpersonal, that's something more, and it's transforming society, right? Pluto in Aquarius is not about us in any way, shape, or form. And even if you're an Aquarius person, Aquarius rising people, you'll just be identified with the changes that are happening societally with Pluto in Aquarius. So that's happening. Mars sextile Pluto, and then as you can see here, making sure you can see it. Yes, you can. Also to the opposition with Black Moon Lilith, right? Our primal drives opposite Uranus, and then also we have, it looks like the moon is going to be square Jupiter, but the big one is the Sun and Chiron conjunct at 27 degrees Aries. This is awesome. And Mercury and Neptune will be conjunct as well. So remember when I talked about Mars and Neptune being conjunct and how, it can be very dangerous? Same thing with Mercury and Neptune, because, your mind is just flooded with all of the possible fantasy and delusion and the smoke and mirrors. But it also can be such a beautiful, a jumping off point, right, of that cardinal fire energy of really stepping into alignment with something more than ourselves, very intentionally seeing ourselves as part of the whole and not losing ourselves, but identifying ourselves. So that's wonderful. This conjunction with the Sun and Chiron really speaks to me personally because of the Sabian symbol. And again, this is going to be where the new moon is too. So that's the other thing. But this will be conjunct right at the balsamic moon as the moon is coming into alignment with both Chiron and the Sun. 27 degrees Aries is through imagination. I'm just going to read it actually. Through imagination, a lost opportunity is regained. Now, I feel like that this is about revising our attitude about who we are and what we desire and what our potential really is. Now, remember, Jupiter is at this point where the seed has been crucified, right? It is germinating. The ego is falling away. That doesn't mean that there is no ego. It means that there's evolution happening, transformation. 27 degrees Aries. Through imagination, a lost opportunity is regained. Okay, this symbol makes it clear that the mind that has become overstimulated and obsessed by all it appears to be able to accomplish in some new realm of experience may easily fail. The disciple fails in his test, or at least it seems to him that he has failed. Oh boy. Oh man, I'm getting all kinds of feels right now. Actually, the failure may have been meant, and failures in quotes, by the way. Actually, the failure may have been meant by his guru to be a challenge to the emergence of a new capacity. Do you trust? Do you trust spirit? I mean, I have to remind myself every day about this. Generally speaking, this capacity is what one calls creative imagination. Didn't we just talk about this with the full moon? The mind must first imagine that which he will then be able sooner or later to actually experience. At this stage, it may be difficult to distinguish success from failure. Nothing may fail like success, people say. What counts is the development of undaunted faith in the pursuit of one's ideals. And if, meeting Chiron like this, coming into the new moon right after, boy, this is going to touch on our feels like you wouldn't believe. And the fact that Black Moon Lilith is in late Scorpio, opposite Uranus like this, yeah. Oh my gosh. There is definitely something mirrored, either in your relationships, either in, any number of circumstances. Maybe you are the Heyoka in your family or your social circle. Yeah. Oh boy. In which case you also will be the mirror for other people, and that's going to have all kinds of fallout in its own way. But I would say here that the fact that the Sun and Chiron are meeting at this degree, starseed origins aside, that's going to be something we talk about in the membership. And in fact, I feel like that's really where a lot of the starseed information is going to start going, is to the Catalyst membership, because it is really operating at a completely different level. As far as the way that I do the work, that it just doesn't even seem like I can touch it with any real authenticity in this format, right? So I guess if you want to learn more about the Andromeda starseed energy and this upcoming new moon, you better get signed up for Catalyst membership. So everything is in the description box. You know the drill. I think that the Sun and Chiron coming into conjunction at this point is going to trigger a big healing, but it's going to come with an exposure of the wound, right? Something that is going to challenge, and it's going to move throughout the rest of April into May, because this is going to be where the new moon intention is really set, but it becomes exact on the balsamic moon the day before. And specifically with this opposition with Black Moon Lilith and Uranus, whatever this is, it's going to expose the wound. We will become identified with it. The failure that we think is a failure might actually be a success. And our challenge moving forward from this point is to see our failures as success and to be connected to our faith in the potentiation of those ideals and the manifestation of them, right? And that's something we're going to be talking more about, in the next new moon and beyond. But in the meantime, with this full moon in Libra, especially later today or tomorrow, when the moon is exactly opposite this position, which is in conjunction to Arcturus, right? We're going to be really, I think, given a really beautiful opportunity to emotionally tap into and to clarify for ourselves what is peace. What is peace of mind? What is equilibrium within our emotional landscape? And how do we tap into that so that we can still be playful, imaginative, that we don't lose a sense of magic within ourselves, even when something that we really want or something that we are really yearning for or desiring seems to have failed in the first attempt. And remember, maybe this is part of the learning process of what it is that we want, right? Just because we fail once doesn't mean that it's impossible. But we have to be challenged, I feel like, in order to really clarify and really ground ourselves in, is this what we really want? And do we want it to be this way? And we're going to, if we can't embrace, for those who can't embrace this full moon, I mean, it's just going to be further steeped in delusion, right? And getting really upset when things are continuing to get upset and forcing the issue, right? Attempting to force the issue, whatever that is. So, all right, friends, I think we're done. Yes, we are. Oh, yeah. All right, so I guess this is the normal time frame for these forecasts. I've stated a pretty steady 1 hour plus, so we're just going to leave it here. So, my friends, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate all of you so very much. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so you can get one last look at my full face, if that is something that works for you. I don't know. It's important to be able to see people, see their face, hear their voice, look in their eyes. You know what I mean? So what you see is what you get. And for those of you who know me personally, you know that is the precise truth, that there is nothing different here than who I am in my personal life. So I am very private in terms of who I share information with and how much, but in terms of just the way I carry myself, there is no online persona. It is exactly who I am in my normal life. So anyway, and I think that that's lacking with all of the social media realm and people, influencing, and there's just a lot of distortion. And one of the things that I really value is just being authentic and being as little distorted as I can. I mean, I'm still human and I got my own issues just like the rest of y'all. So we're all in this together. So if you are interested in Catalyst membership, you get 2 readings a month. If you're a premium member, you get your own personal reading every 4 to 6 weeks as well. Access to a private membership site where you get to access the video of these readings and your own discount code for all of the services on my website. You can find a link to that to sign up in the description box below. You'll get more information when you follow that link. If you want to get on my email list, it's really just to let people know when I post any content or if I have any specials or any discounts or anything like that. I put it out to the email list first. So I try not to spam people too much with that. And if you're interested in a reading for yourself, if you're interested in energy work as well, everything you need is on my website, and that's linked in the description box below or in the social media page that you're finding this. So take care of yourselves, everyone. Enjoy the full moon. Don't lose your sense of play and imagination, even if it's something that you just have to internalize for the time being, right? Don't lose the magic within yourself. I mean, that's really where it all comes from. So, and remember, nothing fails like success. Is just part of it. So take what you can, learn from the situation, and know that growth doesn't come from doing the same thing over and over again. It comes from overcoming what you thought you couldn't do. So, all right, friends, thank you for being here. I appreciate all of you so much. Happy Easter to those of you who are I don't want to say celebrating it, but yeah, celebrating it, I guess you could say. Happy Easter, happy Passover, happy spring, whatever it is that you are focused on right now in this season. And I'll see you guys on the next video, which will be the new moon in Aries, conjunct Andromeda, on the 17th of April. All right, take care, everyone. See ya.